you are almost at eye level with the garden. And I was trying for the sense of enclosure, so you feel as though you're enclosed within a garden and not right on the road. I chose birch trees. There are 3 of them here, to frame the building and the plantings while not blocking the view of the building, and also signage in the town, in the hamlet. As you're traveling south on 9H, there's a number of signs as you reach to the intersection. So it was important for us not to block those. This next drawing is more of a blueprint for the garden that I did, and it indicates the sizes and positions of the planter boxes and the positions of the trees. As you can see, the planter boxes are, the large one on the left is 10 feet deep by 32 feet long. The smaller one in front of the children's room is 22 feet long by 5 feet deep. And we had 3 trees, one here, one there, and one here. We ended up moving these to a position here, and I chose not to plant the hydrangeas because, well, frankly, I wanted to put as much money as I could into the plants. And I felt the trees were really great enough on their own. So we sent bids out to 3 landscape contractors in the area, and 2 came back remarkably similar, uncannily. So we went with the more local of those 2 vendors. All 3 of them were fantastic, and any one of them could have done a beautiful job. We went with Pondside Nursery, who did a wonderful job. I must say they were just brilliant. So the work commenced in the summer of 2019, and here you can see the crew marking out the beds, the planter boxes, and here they're drilling for footers for the posts of the planter boxes. And once the posts were in place, work commenced on constructing the steel boxes. So the frames were set down first, and then the steel panels were attached to it. Here, this shows that the steel panels really came on site, cut to size. So there wasn't any cutting, or, well, there was a little bit of welding, but not much on site. Pondside tried to get as much fabricated before they got to the site. And this shows you, and you can see from this shot how the boxes work to raise the level of the garden. So the garden, of course, is in here, and while you're in the children's room, you really are at that height. And better understand the feeling of being buffered from the road. Now, here you can see that the box is about halfway full with gravel, and that was for better drainage. And we were concerned about how this would react in the dead of winter. So on top of the gravel, we laid weed cloth, and then the planting mix on top of that. And also braces were added to the planter boxes to prevent bowing and to keep them straight. Here you can see again the braces that run perpendicular to the box. Now, the other thing we did was add insulation to the inside of the boxes. You know, we weren't sure, as I mentioned before, how the plants were going to react next to the steel box. And so trying to do whatever we can while we are still constructing, we thought of putting some insulation in, which was a very fortunate afterthought. well, not really an afterthought, but while we were doing it, we thought of this idea, as things often go. So here you can see that the insulation is in. The mix of soil and potting mix and nutrients that Pondside created is in. And I've got my planting sketches here, and I'm trying to visually review all the plants and where they're going to go, and make sure that there's enough room. Because things always change from what you have on paper to putting it on the ground. And I've learned the hard way to always double check. So here we are. The rest of the topsoil is in the planting mix. And you can see in the corner here, I just wanted you to note the irrigation. It was very important to have an irrigation system in place. And as you may recall, last summer was so hot. I doubt if this would have made it without the irrigation system. So each box has its own system, and the line runs under the gravel and comes up the inside of the box. Oops. Get back there. Inside the box. And then from here, there is a connection, and the irrigation lines run horizontally through the box. The same is true on the smaller one. Here is, the box is filled with the compost mix, and the irrigation is in place. And we've left room for a top layer of mulch, which will come after we plant. So this was all we did in 2019. And it sat here through the winter, which was great, because then we had an opportunity to see how much of it was going to settle, as you know, they always do. So in July of 2020 is when the plants arrived, and we started the actual planting. So again, I want to be able to get there and set out the plants, but how do you make sure you know where everything goes? So these were the drawings that I did. This is the south box, the larger one, the north box, the one in front of the children's room, and I roughly put down the numbers of plants I felt was needed in each section, the distance between them, and how many plants I would need. Following my plan, I began to set out these plants. Things often change, as I mentioned before, going from plants on paper to plants on the ground. So I always set the plants out myself. I really don't like having a landscape contractor do it, because I like to, well, I guess I like control, but besides that, I really like to fuss with it, because adjustments often are needed. Sometimes you get a great idea when you see the plants in place that you didn't think of on paper. So having that flexibility to create a better placement. And also, when these plants arrive, it can be a little intimidating if you've got the crew of like 9 guys waiting for you. So what I usually do is try to get there. Well, I asked Pondside to deliver the plants the night before, which they did. And I got here very early to start setting these out. And well, there's only one guy in this picture here, but I can assure you there are 6 others waiting to start. And the planting went very quickly. So it was really important to have made my decisions, made adjustments, choose plants. So that went well. And a word about the trees. There's one of the river birch here. And I want to say that I chose the river birch primarily for their suitability to this site. Once established, river birch can really tolerate an inhospitable condition. Also, and this is secondarily, because they're a native plant. My belief is that it's, it's right plant, right place. So it's more important that you choose a plant that will survive and hopefully thrive in a given position. And then if it's a native plant, that's great. So moving on. So here are the plants planted and mulched. And I want to say also that the plants were really of a nice size when they arrived. I decided to spend the funds that we had on larger plants than getting small, plugs. And I felt that it meant, and getting fewer plants and wanting them to be bigger, really, I felt paid off because they were stronger. And I felt because they were stronger, they would get off to a better start. And also, I think it was important that once the garden was planted, that it made an impact. It's it's a public. It had to have a decent public presence, I felt. So the larger plants worked very well. And this is about a month after planting. And again, remember, it was intensely hot last summer, but the irrigation system really helped. And you can see that these plants are really bulking up. In the beginning, the irrigation system ran daily because it was so hot. And I think life inside these steel boxes was probably even hotter. But they did bulk up nicely. Let me see if I can move that.
They don't see that.
Okay. We start to change into high summer now, and the Shenandoah grass in the back is starting to turn red and very sparkly across the top of their leaves. And at home, I was growing this, it's called Love Lies Bleeding, but the name of it is amaranth. And I brought some over to put into the garden. And it just to contrast and with the grasses and to repeat this color. Okay, there we go. I also added a phlox called Gina here, and they came as landscape plugs that I bought for my garden. And phlox usually self-seed, if not deadheaded. And so we banished it from our original planting list. But this variety is great. And if you have an opportunity to purchase it, please do. It has a beautiful color. It does not self-seed. It behaves in a very, it stands up. It's a little slower to bulk up, but it's just an excellent plant, and it's gotten a lot of awards of merit. So we're trying it out here as well as in our garden. And this slide I'm showing particularly because I wanted you to see how wonderfully the steel is patinating. The patina is really quite beautiful on that. And this is a plant portrait I wanted to highlight, which is a plant called Lespedeza. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And it's the pea family. And in summer, when not much of anything else is blooming in one's garden, this just covers itself in these mauvey, pink, magenta, and you can see they open at different times, so they go through their different points in their maturity. So it has a beautiful shades of this color. It can also grow as a shrub in some areas. So unless you want a shrub, it's good to keep it pruned back, which in our case we do anyway because we do a major cutback every spring. And here we're just moving further into the season. And now this is heading into autumn. The grasses start to take on this beautiful sort of toasty mauve color. The light shining through them just sparkles. Yeah. This is a little blue stem called Standing Ovation. And what's nice about it is the fact that it does stand up. Most little blue stems, in my experience, will flop. And also it has a nice red tint to the leaves, which plays nicely with the Shenandoah grass back there. And also the color of the grasses is getting closer to the color of the steel boxes. And again, I just want to remind everyone that this is the first year for this garden, and I'm just so impressed with the way this thing has bulked up. And this is how we left the garden for the winter. You know, things died back, but the grasses stayed up, and it really did look beautiful for most of the winter until we had some really heavy snows. And this was taken a few weeks ago when I went and did a major cutback of all the grasses. And you can see in the autumn, we planted some alliums, and you can see that they are starting to poke up. And this was just last week. And I drove by today, and they're twice that size now. So hopefully soon, this will be just a maze of purple allium blossoms. And at that time, the grasses will start to come up. So I'm trying to extend the season. When you have mostly a grass garden, they do come up later in the season. So it's great to, I always like to do a layer of bulbs so that something comes up before the grasses. And if this were a, well, I'll show you in the next example, I would also put in daffodils, things that come up even earlier, maybe species tulips, and maybe we'll be able to add that to this garden in year 2. But we have the basics in the boxes, and little by little, we're tweaking it just to enhance the combinations. So I want to talk a little bit about using this planting style in a home setting. And this is a photograph of this ranch style house that belongs to my friend and client, Pat Fesher, who has a very sunny plot on Route 23 here in the hamlet. And it's perfect for grasses and sun-loving perennials. There were a few very large shrubs here and up in here. They had really overgrown their size, and those were cut down before we began. So this is, and because the house was on one long plane, I wanted the plantings to have some depth to them out from the house. And because the house is in one long plane, the sections had to be big. And this was something that Pat and I discussed in the very beginning. It was, she concurred that she really wanted a garden that would stand up to, you know, cars going by and the size of the house. So this was, as I said, a picture of the house as it was. And this is a drawing that I did illustrating what I felt the garden could look like. And as you can see, there's layers of planting from the house, the porch, out to the front. It does stagger a bit, although there are some wispy things that are in the middle, so it's not all perfectly gradated. And again, the importance of having large drifts of a single plant. This is the house looking east. And you'll notice there's a wellhead here, and there's something, Pat didn't know quite what, buried in here somewhere. So we were very careful removing the, there was a very large shrub. It could have been maybe even a yew, I don't remember, but we were very careful removing that with the roots. So on this view, this is what I wanted the planting to look like. Again, having something large in the center. This part of the garden bows out from the rest, so it's wider, and just having a great collection of perennials. Here is my overhead drawing, which acts as a planting guide. But also I wanted to show Pat where things would go on a grid. And basically it gave me the opportunity to kind of count plants. And this garden, there was about 940 square feet in total. And we really planted it also to keep weeds down. We had 4, 5, 6, we had about 650 plants go in. And I'm going to show you just some pictures now of what the garden looks like. Now you see in Pat's garden, we were able to plant Rudbeckias. Here they are, because she was very, and is very involved with her garden. Has the time and the interest in going in there and maintaining it. So the Rudbeckias, the black-eyed Susans wasn't an issue. We also have some echinacea in here, back in here, which gets the same treatment. There's a better shot of it. So again, this is the little blue stem standing ovation, which I used in the library. This is the Amsonia hubrechtii used in the library. This grass is Carl Forrester that I used in the library, Cloud 9, which I did not. This is a wonderful feathery chartreuse shrub called Spirea ogon. And if left to its own devices, it can get large. But again, we keep it pruned back because we really want, and this will probably get higher up in here. And here it is later in the season. And the last thing I want to show you in Pat's garden is kind of a view of it, of the textures and the forms, and how you can see through the grass, get a nice big burst of chrome yellow there. So the other thing I wanted to talk about briefly was how, let's say you don't want to do an entire garden on that theme, but you wanted to add bits of it to your garden, which I think is a great idea because there's some tough plants there that could really add to a garden setting. For instance, here in our garden, you know, with the hornbeam hedges and the clipped boxwood and yew hedges, this sort of whimsy and frothiness of the grasses really helps create a more interesting picture. And it's interesting in the winter as well. And this past winter, you know, again, I didn't really need to cut these down until spring. This is a shot earlier in the season.
Slow down for a moment. Okay.
This is a shot. Oh, we're still in the winter?
Yeah, it's lagging a bit.
Oh, sorry. Let me pause.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, here we go. Thank you. This shot is earlier in the garden, and you can see the Shenandoah grass in the background. And in the foreground is that flower, that amaranth, Love Lies Bleeding, that I allow to self-seed in our gravel. And this was, I pulled some up and added to the library garden. And once you have this, it's very easy to edit. If you have too much of it, you just pull it out, it comes up very easily. And it's a great plant. Plus, it's an ancient grain. So if you feel like it, you can cut these guys off, dry them up, and eat them. This is a wild, sort of a wild natural planting into which I've added again, the Shenandoah grass, which is so versatile. And this was a wild planting around the sculpture by a local artist, Hudson artist, by the name of Mark Wasserback. And if you're interested, you can see his work. He has a shop and a studio at the Antique Warehouse in Hudson. Here it is again. And in this picture, I'm using it again to see how the light just plays on this grass. And it just adds another dimension to a planting. The Lesbediza, which I had shown a plant portrait of, this I tucked into a more formal herbaceous border. And it just fills this space really beautifully. And the sedum are just starting. Asters haven't started yet. So it's a really great midsummer plant. And with this photo, I just want to illustrate how you can insert wild looking plants into a very, in this case, a rather formal design. So they actually help each other become a more interesting picture. The formality of the hedges and I hope you're not hearing that, and the boxes are enhanced by the frothiness of the grasses and of the asters, and vice versa. So if you were to look at this without the formality, everything would be kind of mushy, and the formality really helps sharpen that. And if you were to look at it with just the formality, it would be rather dull and staid. And lastly, I want to talk a little bit about, we've talked mostly about perennials in the library and in the garden settings, and not so much, about the trees. And birch trees are wonderful, and particularly, some of them are better than others in terms of disease and borers, but this is an example of using birch trees in a garden setting. But often you'll see a clump of birch trees or two in a landscape as an accent, and that's really beautiful. But in this case, this is a very small garden in Hudson that I did using, actually it was just 5 birch trees underplanted with a mosaic of shade-loving plants with gravel connecting. And it's a very tiny garden tucked away behind some buildings in Hudson. And as I said, using birch trees as the main component of the garden, and it creates this intimate wooded setting, almost like having a little private forest in the middle of town. So I hope you found interesting things in the talk, or maybe some ideas you might want to try, or questions for me. I'd happy to answer any of them. And I would like to thank Thea Scoop, Vicki Rosenwald, and the Friends of the Claverack Free Library and its Board of Trustees for asking me to give this talk. And actually working on this garden has really been a joy. So thank you.
Slow down, think about things. Right. So it'll probably go more like 45 minutes.
Hi, I'm not sure who we're hearing there. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to Peter. Thank you for designing the garden. thank you for talking about the garden. Thank you for inspiring us. I think that there are going to be a lot of people who are going to run out and either dig in the dirt or run to the store. A question was asked about the river birches, whether they can tolerate wind. What do you think?
Well, so far, that's a very windy site there. And which is one of the reasons why I chose it. In my experience, I have some here in my garden. I've used them in other gardens. And so far, in my experience, I have not had an issue with that. I mean, providing that it's, as in all trees, providing that they're, rooted, and you may need to stake them initially as you do any tree, but I have not had any adverse experience with wind. I think you're muted, Vicky.
Me. Okay, I'm unmuted. A question from another attendee. It says, thanks, so informative. Is there a chance of getting a list of the plants that you spoke about? Is that somewhere at the library?
I know, but I will send it to Thea.
Oh, okay,
Or
that would be great.
Or however you want me to do it, I'll do it. Yeah.
And then I had a question about amaranth. It's not, is it poisonous or dangerous or anything like that?
I don't think so, because
Oh,
as I
okay.
said, it is ancient grain and you can buy
Yeah.
it in health food stores.
Okay, and maybe moderately critter resistant? Or I guess I would find out.
Yes, in my experience here in our garden, where we have rabbits and just a whole gauntlet of critters,
Yeah.
it hasn't been affected.
And I would imagine that since these plants came from Pondside Nursery, that anybody who wanted to know where to go and buy them, that would be the place. Or one of the
Yes.
places, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I'd like to read just a comment in the Q&A box. It's from Jenny Post, who's the president of the library, which says, I'd like to thank Peter for his generous sharing of talent and time to make such a beautiful space for the public to enjoy. And I think that's, yeah, I think we all feel that way. I guess you noted how the plants and the planters kind of protect the building from the roadway. And I think we have benches back there, right? You can actually sit between the planters and the building.
Not yet.
yet.
Well, yeah,
But that is something we're talking.
yeah. And really be protected from the road and feel like you are in a garden, even though you're kind of right there on 9H. It will be hidden. So it is so spectacular and so interesting to watch it change week by week and month by month. And it was wonderful to look at all winter too, until you cut it all down. Sprouted right back up.
It's starting up again.
Yes, it's starting with a roar. I think, anybody else have any questions? There's nothing else in the chat or in the Q&A. Can only encourage everybody to come over to the library and watch the plants, and to go to Peter and Stephen's garden anytime they're invited.
Yes.
Anytime there's an open day.
We are
Yeah.
open in August, mid-August, the 14th, I think, through the Garden Conservancy, but willing to have a group through to benefit the library anytime.
Yes, and I know you've done some fundraisers for various causes and things like that. Always an inspiration and a great pleasure. mean, spectacular for the library. We're lucky to have you and very grateful.
Oh,
'Cause
thank you. The
no
feeling's
other
mutual.
library has what we have. It's the best. I wonder if we're, here's one more question. Do these plants attract bees?
Yes, they do. The Nepeta and bees and other pollinators as well.
Yes.
As far as bees are concerned, there's Nepeta that is covered with bees when it's blooming, the Lesbidizia, the phlox. But again, because it's mostly grasses because of the maintenance issue. There's also a plant in there, Emsonia hubrechtii, that in the spring has lovely blue flowers, and that also, and the alliums, once they come up and bloom, will be another plant for the bees.
Oh, yeah, right. The alliums. We haven't seen those. Those are new this year. That's going to be great.
Yes, we planted them in the autumn, so they'll be new.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Anyone else? I would say speak now.
I do plan on adding more bits and pieces to it over the season. Maybe and maybe trying out something like a sweet potato vine at the ends, maybe trailing over the side to make it a little lush. But to see what works.
That sounds great. And and hopefully pretty soon, if not this year, then next year, something on the west side of the building.
That would be
Parking lot
great.
side. Right. So, well, I think then we're
Thank you very
done.
much.
I sense that, oh, here's one more question. Okay. What would be great for hummingbirds?
Well, any sort of tubular flower. I think of, is Betty on this call?
No.
And anything that has little tubes. Well, they'd love phlox. No, not lilies so much. They will go after the Nepeta. Oh God, where's my brain?
Give me a second.
Let me think a bit. What else do we have? Let's see what we've got. Yeah, actually, it's talking about Lesbidizia being a big magnet for hummingbirds. Liatris in a wild setting would be great. Veronica is good. Anything that has sort of a tubular flower where they could get their beaks in.
I'm looking, yeah. I looked on the web, and what they list is not particularly things that would be proper for these planters. They say
Also,
like
they're very
pasta.
they're very aggressive hummingbirds. So particularly if there's a couple of males, I mean, it's very. I've been dive bombed in the garden.
Really? But they are small.
Yeah, they are small. They're beautiful.
Yeah. I've never been afraid of them myself. But bee balm, they say bee balm, columbine.
Yes, bee balm. Yes.
Petunias.
Thank you. Yes, bee balm.
Petunias, cleomes, impatiens.
Oh.
They say.
Yeah, they all have a little tube. Like a phlox would have that little tube down to the throat.
Yeah. All right. Well, one last
Okay.
question. Anybody there? Otherwise, I think I just have this sense that everybody wants to get back out into their gardens. Because what a
I'm
day.
very impressed. I'm very impressed and thankful that people came in,
Yeah,
and hopefully maybe some of them are out gardening, listening to this, because it is such a beautiful day.
it is a
I want to
beautiful
get back
day.
out myself.
Yes, well, we're going to run out. Thank you so much.
Thank
I'm
you.
immensely grateful to you for both the garden and the garden talk, and to Thea for managing, all the tech support. And great. See you soon. Thanks a
you.
lot. And
Thank
thanks
you.
to everybody who came.
Everyone, have a good day.
Bye.